So, we have Alex. Today we're going to be talking about self-talk and his research. Alex, can you tell us something about yourself? How you got to be in this position?
Well, about myself. I'm a researcher. I'm from Spain. I do research and self-talk since I started my PhD. I started doing research and self-talk before that. It's a bit illegal, but when I started psychology, I got hired in a tennis academy because I know some languages, and they hired me to translate the sports psychologist they had. He wasn't even a sports psychologist, and he got ill. He got sick. So I was a first-year student, and they asked me to do sports psychology, and I did the only thing that I could do, what I did when I was a tennis player. I taught them how to do self-talk.
Yeah. What do you mean illegal? Come on, that seems a bit of a strong term.
I was a first-year psychology student, and I was in charge of giving psychological training to young athletes. That was great for me.
Yeah.
I was okay for them, I think. I mean, that's really how you should do things.
So, in other words, what you're alluding to is the importance here of having affiliation, qualifications, and regulation of the system.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll come to that. But whereabouts in Spain are you?
Well, in Girona. Girona's in the north of Spain.
Okay.
And the northeast, about 60 kilometers away from the sea, from France, and about 80 kilometers in the north of Barcelona.
Just for everybody, we are in Walsall, where it is a lovely day and it's almost sun. So we just note when it's almost sun in Walsall because it is a rarity, unlike Spain.
Oh yes, it's a bit colder.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about your research.
Well, research on self-talk started with self-talk interventions. I did my PhD. I did it on self-talk interventions with adult tennis players. It basically consists of making adult tennis players repeat cue words during task performance and look on how task performance, in terms of satisfaction, in terms of technique, in terms of concentration, changes or improves.
What sort of words did they say?
All for the intervention purposes, for the research purposes, we left the self-talk completely self-determined. We had a routine, the same routine we use in applied settings. Just in applied settings, you don't work only with the player, you work with the coach and the player. So the routine consists in having them play for a bit and then asking them what they could do better to improve their performance technically.
Okay. So it was the self-talk was technical?
In this case, yes, we did the whole thesis on instructional self-talk. Motivational self-talk did sound to me, at least in tennis, a bit weird. From my own perspective, my own experience, motivational self-talk has never worked for me. I told you I started all that out of my personal experience. And that's about qualifications. That's a problem. I did the only thing that I was able to do.
Okay. Just so the instructional self-talk. Give us an example of what an instructional self-talk would be in that context.
Imagine you ask a tennis player, what could you do to improve your forehand? And he tells you, I should bend my knees.
Okay.
And you tell him, could you please transform the central idea that would make you theoretically play better into a single word, a word that reminds you of bending your knees. You might say knee. Then you ask them to repeat the word knee every time they hit the ball using the natural breathe out.
I all up for that, and you can see its logic because coaches are yelling instructions to their athletes in training and in competition. With self-talk, when you're doing it on their own, it's self-generated and it's instructional. How do you know whether the instructions they give are giving themselves are any good?
In our research, we couldn't. That was one of our limitations. Usually when you do it in applied settings, you do it together with the coach. So athlete and coach are asked, what should the athlete focus on to improve technically? And sometimes the athlete who comes up with the idea, sometimes the coach who comes up with the idea. Actually, in our tennis academy, we had a routine set that everything that coaches told the players had to repeat in self-talk. So coach entered the court and he saw, let's say Ben, playing without moving his feet. And he's like, Ben, move your feet. So Ben had to say a word that remembers him of this sentence until the coach gave him a new instruction. That was in applied settings. This way, we kept athletes' attention on the coach's instructions for longer. Now, if the coach was right with his instructions, well, that's on his criteria.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting one, isn't it? In that it's something that is encouraged, and you can see why learners benefit from that, because they are correcting errors and reinforcement of good technique. But at the other time is whether it has any real value, and unless the technique is really helpful. Sometimes it's better not to say anything, isn't it?
I will be completely honest. We published 6 papers, and we could have published 2, and we would have made the same contribution.
Okay.
Instructional self-talk can work, especially in precision tasks with a high technical component, such as tennis is. Now, there are several theories who would completely contradict instructional self-talk. Attentional focus theories, for example, they always try to... They say that athletes should draw their attention to external objects and not to internal movements. Instructional self-talk does just that. It draws attention to internal movement. It's not something that works always. It did work in the applied setting in the academies because you keep athletes focused. These athletes train 5 hours a day.
Okay.
So they're 12-year-old kids, and they train 5 hours a day, 6 days a week. So a lot of the training time, their minds are just passive. Using self-talk, you get their minds active, but that doesn't mean that the self-talk itself did the job. It can do the job, but it shouldn't do it.
The performance was? So it's quite technical, I'm guessing.
Yes. And in our thesis, we did forehand strokes, cross-court. We put in an area. We wanted them to hit the ball to. They were instructed not to change the way of hitting from the conventional strokes. So we didn't want them to push the ball.
So it correlated very much with the instructions. I mean, we did a study with which was a BBC, an online study, which had instructional self-talk, and it's a computer game to find numbers. And the instructional self-talk really came out badly. And we just assumed that. We didn't assume it. We read that as our advice wasn't very good, and the task wasn't very good. Advice wasn't needed. Or the interventions that worked best are ones that got arousal quite high, because then that task, getting more aroused, is probably what was beneficial. So it's that sort of, when you read around self-talk, and lots of the journalists have come back to me on the basis of that study, have said, well, what sort of self-talk should we have? And you go, well, actually, that's entirely contextualised to what you actually want that self-talk to do. So if it's technical, then absolutely it should be technical. And they really did struggle to get the idea that our findings couldn't apply to absolutely everything.
They say we have 2 types of self-talk in these strategic self-talk interventions. There's broad categories. Instructional self-talk is thought to work best for precision tasks, but not always. Sometimes it can overload memory, and you can have paralysis by analysis. Yeah. So be careful, it does not always work, not even with precision tasks. For endurance and strength tasks, we recommend motivational self-talk. That is basically use of motivational words in the beginning of the task, or in moments that you have rest, to keep the athlete psyched up. That works better for endurance and strength tasks.
Or where performing better is just doing the same thing with greater intensity.
Yes, exactly.
And it's quite difficult to. It's an interesting one, isn't it? It's quite difficult to be technical when you're a bit nervous, which is quite a lot of what sport and many sort of single performance in front of an audience, in front of a discrete outcome is all about. Trying to hold that information in. Your research has moved on to what athletes say to themselves, which I think is quite interesting. Rather than you giving them self-talk scripts?
Yes, we changed with the thesis. The thesis was a lot of work. I spent 5 months in a tennis club giving free lessons. So they had a lesson. They had the study. Yeah. And if it was a control group, they had a third session where they got the intervention as well. So that was absolutely brutal. I mean, I was a PhD student. I lived off apples basically, so I could do that. That
You
was
lived
okay.
off apples.
I lived on apples and the leftovers from my colleagues from the university.
Oh dear.
That was interesting.
Yeah.
But then when we finished the PhD, I couldn't go on like that, so I needed something different. And unfortunately, at the beginning, my research was more luck-driven than reasonable. Since I couldn't change athlete self-talk, I started to ask them which self-talk they use by themselves.
But I mean, the self-talk is an interesting one in that you read it from the intervention-based literature, and it's the idea that it's that the person wasn't doing it, then they were doing it, and that made a big difference. When you look at it from the self-regulation literature, you go, well, actually, everyone's doing it, and everyone's doing it all the time anyway. The fine tune up of what's going on, or the turn down the volume of what's going on, seems intuitively a far better place to start. Because if someone is a real self-talker, you've got to embrace what they're saying to themselves to begin with.
We did change. We started to gather descriptive data of what athletes say to themselves in different situations in their sport. The first thing we wanted to compare their self-talk in different emotion eliciting situations. We had 8 emotions, and we gathered about 200, 300 statements per emotion.
Okay, 8 emotions. That would have taken so everyone did 8?
Yes, everyone did 8.
Okay.
So we bought a lot of cupcakes, water. We sat with 5 and 6 of them in a room, and we told them it's going to be tough. If they can concentrate, if they can focus, we put on some classic music, and we made them feel comfortable, and we went through imagining a situation. Remember a situation when you felt anxious. They described the situation. We asked questions so they could really relive the situation as good as possible. And then we asked them to write down what they told to themselves. The problem is that what we found didn't even let us compare the 8 emotions.
Right.
We found that there are 2 different types of self-talk athletes use. One that's intuitive, one that's automatic, one that's spontaneous, and another that's rational. It's operative. We call that goal-directed self-talk. So that's where we started our line of research that we have today.
Just give us a flavour of how that would work in reality, so that we can follow that.
Now imagine you're a soccer player, and it's a corner kick against you. So you stroke the ball out of the area, and suddenly there's a whistle blow. Now you see that the umpire said penalty. So the first thing you're gonna tell yourself is, "Oh, that bloody bastard! He just messed the game. I'm gonna kill him."
The crowd have probably said it too.
The crowd has said that too. Now, if you look at it, that doesn't serve any purpose.
No.
You don't even really plan of assassinating the umpire. No. It's just something that's descriptive of the emotion that you feel. It's just an emotional impulse that went to the parts of the brain that it was transferred into language. That's what we call spontaneous self-talk. It has no function. It expresses what the way the athlete perceives the situation. Now, after a second, or after the other team scored the goal, the defender is still angry. He has to self-regulate. He has to do something. He can't go around angry all match long. There's still 60 minutes left. So he starts telling himself to calm down. Anyone can make a mistake. Relax, be patient, focus on the ball. Whatever he thinks that would be helpful, these operative thoughts, this is goal-directed self-talk.
The non-functional stuff is evaluating the situation. There's a self-awareness bit to that, isn't there?
It is. Not only self-awareness, you can see a lot of psychological constructs, the ones we study. They might not really exist in the real world, but they emerge over time. We can speak about attributions. We can speak about self-efficacy. We can speak even about motivation. They are all, you can find them all in the spontaneous self-talk. You can see how the mind of the athlete works by listening to his spontaneous self-talk.
And that is a very good example of how the emotions colour the language and the expression of the the emotions through the language, and of how some of the work which of Yuri Hanin's group, which then look at what the descriptors of emotions are, why they come back with these colourful sets of narratives rather than the affective experience. Because a person might have been angry, but the narratives around that were something else, and maybe they didn't recognise the term anger. But in going through that process, that self-awareness, is that then triggering the instruction that comes from that? Do you need the instruction or that relationship between the first emotional response and then the solution to the emotional response? Could that not be? It's almost like an emotion regulation exercise being presented via self-talk.
So what we do when we speak about emotional regulation by goal-directed self-talk, we take a very slightly different approach from other emotion regulation studies. We don't see the athlete regulating his emotion. That would be instructional self-talk interventions, for example, motivational self-talk interventions. What we do, we see that there's one part of the athlete's self who's talking to another part of the athlete's self. There's this irrational self, this immediate self, this uncontrollable self that basically explains the situation to the self and makes evaluations based on his general attitudes, motivations, and beliefs. And then there's another part of the self. It can be very, very strictly defined. Sometimes we listen to our father in our head telling us something, or a coach or a mother, and sometimes it's just a voice. So when we speak about emotion regulation, we don't see the athlete regulating himself. We see one part of the athlete talking to the other part of the athlete.
Yeah.
We had nice experiments, not really sports, but we had them write down anything that happened that went through their mind in a competitive situation. And you see that these two parts of the self, they even have a conversation one with the other. Imagine somebody's really down and score, and he says his automatic response is, I will never win. And then there's the goal-directed response, but you have to try. The more you try, the better chances you have. And then the spontaneous part can talk back and tell him, but there's many chances I have. I'm down so many points. And if I try, it will even look worse.
Oh, sorry. Is this booked out? Is it? Till what time? Do you mind me asking?
1:30.
Okay, sorry about that.
Well, that's the interesting thing, how the mind has conversations with itself. I think something from Plato.
Yeah.
That's what we're interested in.
Yeah. So how does the intervention work then? How does that how do you set up with the interventions around self-talk with various different people? And the applicability of this outside of sport is considerable to me.
So first off, the basic distinction between spontaneous and goal-directed self-talk is purely theoretical. So the first contributions we did was to the way we understand the athlete's mind. Now, once we did that, we faced the fact that we have to do something applied.
Yeah.
And we did an intervention. We went back to the interventions. We have a goal-directed self-talk intervention. We used that in applied settings. And we published a paper with an elite athlete using this. It's a self-confrontational interview where an elite athlete, could be a developing athlete, could be anyone, talks to the sports psychologist about the situations which are, in his experience, problematic in sport, especially from a psychological perspective. Making a mistake, being tired, something that's recurrent, something that happens quite often, but that's still problematic. Once you explore the situations with the spontaneous thoughts, because they're going to tell you something about his irrational beliefs, for example, and also his emotions, because emotions tell us something of how the energy levels react to the situation. And then you ask him or her, so what goal-directed self-talk do you use in that situation? What do you usually tell yourself? They come up with some of these stereotypical answers, or even some more idiosyncratic answers. And you ask them, this is a very important question. Now, for how long have you had this problem? And how good does your goal-directed self-talk work? So I remember this elite athlete, he's an orienteer. And he said, I've been orienteering for about 15 years. So I had this situation since I started competing after 2 years. So for 13 years. You consistently use this goal-directed self-talk to help yourself. And he's like, yes, I did. Did it ever work? Consistently? He's like, sometimes, but not consistently not. Okay, and then you come up and you start, he has to, or she has to explore alternative goal-directed self-talk. You write that on a piece of paper, and he takes or she takes that to the competition, waits for this situation to emerge again. So you have conversations, you take an athlete, and you talk with the rational part of his mind. And together with the rational part of the mind, you come up with a plan of how to control the irrational part of the mind once you're in competition.
Which, in other words, the partial reinforcement of what they've done, having some success, means that they try it again, and it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't work. They haven't got a better alternative, and what you're trying to do is stop that, really, because it's a fragile basis, and replace it with something different, which then gets them out of that loop, and could do two things, couldn't it? One, it might well be directly beneficial in the same way instructional self-talk to a task which is highly instructional works perfectly, and two, it gives them belief that how they're preparing is much better, and those two things in combination could have the belief effect could have an add-on effect to the instructional, but it could be an effect in itself, even if the instructional wasn't so great.
There's something we observed in applied settings, is that when the athlete comes with a problem that has persisted, the athletes never come the first day. They come after sometimes years for a recurrent problem with their own solutions. Now, you try to do something with them. There are two ways. One, you're not lucky. You're not unlucky. I mean, you didn't succeed. You might have another chance, or he just thinks that the sports psychologist is not good. Second, it's even worse. You succeed because the athletes, I've seen that a lot of times, they will come over and over back. And every time they experience a problem, they come and ask you because they need you, because they lost faith in their own voice. And they need you, and they remember what you say. The idea about goal-directed self-talk interventions at its core is we want to strengthen the coach within. You want to give the athletes autonomy to self-regulate. Now, we work self-regulation on 3 levels, not only emotional self-regulation. We are also doing studies with self-regulated learning and with self-motivation.
And that is a very important part about the dependency, and it actually brings in the bit about the need for accreditation, because an accredited consultant would not want the athlete being dependent on them, be aware that process was going on, whereas someone less experienced might actually be flattered by it, because actually it's a positive thing. You are wanted in my preparation program, and if they're quite good, that actually provides its rewards in itself. That's a very successful athlete, and you're associated with them. Interesting. So where is your research going now? What's the next steps then?
We are now the next studies we do. We want to go. There's several things we want to do, but we always think about what we can do. If it would be for me, I would really like to combine this descriptive research on what athletes think with neurological research on how the brain works, because there are theoretically 2 different brain processes associated to spontaneous and goal-directed self-talk. One is rather the default network of the brain, and the other ones are prefrontal areas. But we can't do that. So alternatively, we are into 3 directions, I would resume. The first one is we want to work with decision making.
Okay.
We want to see how the mind negotiates with itself in an important situation where you can take risk or you can't take risks. That's the first thing. I think that's really interesting. Second, we're looking into a lot of self-regulated learning. We do that with adults right now because it's very, very difficult for kids to remember what they thought. Depending on the developmental process, some kids, they don't even distinguish clearly self-talk to talk. And once they do distinguish it, well, it's very difficult to find about what age you can assess kids' self-talk. Now we do work with some PE teachers, they're researchers in physical education, and they came up with a great idea about how to make kids do self-talk. They're gonna act. The kid will be standing in two places at the same time. Once he will look at his place as an athlete and going to give himself an instruction. Then he's going to go and stand where the athlete stands and talks back to the imaginary coach. We're going to try that. This is the second thing. The third thing, we want to continue in the research on goal-directed self-talk and emotions.
And what's stopping you from doing the first one? Funding.
The first one, decision-making.
The neuro one.
The funding and my own capabilities. I have no idea how to do brain research. I just admire people who do. I don't admire them. I don't admire the applicability of their research because it's still done a lot in the lab. The tasks they use to study goal-directed and spontaneous self-talk in tasks, it's their tasks. I mean, the physical component is pressing a button.
I was going to say that has to be quite narrow, doesn't it?
It is, and they're the best, and they still don't have right now the possibilities to do something really applied. Now, if I could do that, that would be fantastic to see how different brain circuits interplay with different types of thoughts.
We had brain stuff on our emotion regulation project, and it always looked like it was going to be really exciting, but the results were not as exciting as we thought they would be. The pictures were quite good. That came from the scans and stuff, but it was not as illuminating as what one might hoped. And the neurological basis of psychology always seems a very attractive way of going down, and I understand why, because we're so heavily reliant on self-report that you can see our frustrations, but it often doesn't quite get the magic result you quite like, and just whether it's right or wrong, but just the clear result that you would like. So where's the next step then with research? What's the current project you're on?
Oh, it's these 3 projects. The one with decision making.
Yeah.
That's going to be students writing down their thoughts just before an activity and task. I'm not very sure if it's going to be a sport task or just a cognitive task. And we're going to have 2 groups, one that can't take a decision on how fast they're going to...
What sort of task? Because you don't need to do this with sport. And
no,
the outside of sport gives you every sort of opportunity to take this literature into general psychology. Because if this emerges in sport, it hasn't hit the barrier going across from general sport to general psychology. And quite often some of the nice work that goes on in sports psychology doesn't cross that boundary. All that directional work in anxiety, which opened up all those appraisals, never really drove itself into general psychology, which is always a great shame. And in order to do that, you need a real strong campaign needs to go in there to do that.
I think so. I mean, one of my personal goals is to publish in general psychology, but not publishing in general psychology a paper that has been done in real life settings. Well, I think I want to publish a sport research in general psychology, because sport is just part of general psychology. It's a shame that we put these things apart. Well, for the task that we use, we thought about different tasks. We did the dart throwing task, but it doesn't really work because they have to verbalize their thoughts. And a lot of types of thoughts are not verbalized. There's one type of, it's not even self-talk, it's a type of thinking that's mind-wandering. That was a fantastic thing, how the people's mind wander off and explores different things, not related anything to what you do. You lose these. So we do written thought sampling. Might make the participants write something that they didn't think. But compared to not seeing all that they think, I think it's a great option. Now that they have to sit down, and we had 2 types of tasks. One is an anagram task, but it's almost, there's no motor ability linked to it. So what we did, we have a card sorting task. That's very simple. You have a deck of cards, and you know that some cards are red, some cards are black. You just have to separate them as fast as possible in a competitive setting. So we did a study about that. Maybe it will be published. One of the major barriers to get published is that it's not a sport task.
I think you just got to find a different journal.
You might find a different journal. The thing is that we ask our participants. I know that because we train in applied settings. We train athletes by card sorting tasks.
Yeah.
because we can do decision making in changing environments very easily, and you can work different parts of the brain by tapping an eye and or doing different things. That works fantastic. And all the athletes we work with, they say that these competitive card sorting tasks elicit situations that are similar to those in sport, especially about emotions.
Yeah, yeah.
You can feel pre-competitive anxiety. You can feel anger. You can feel sadness, demotivation if you're far behind. Euphoria if you beat somebody you didn't think you could beat. Confidence if you're way up. All these emotions they experience in their sport are experienced as well in the card task.
Yeah, I just think there's a wealth of journals that will take that sort of stuff, which sport often sit in there as a subtopic. All the applied psychology journals would be interested in that. So I wouldn't rule that out.
We'll do that for a second. Maybe this one will get accepted in the end. We're going through the review process. We did some reviews already, so it looks good.
Reviewers.
Yeah. Now the new study you want to put in decision making. You want one group. They will know what time they have to make, what time they have to do the task. So maybe they have 60 seconds. Everybody has 60 seconds. You finish that, you get some points. Then it's going to be 55 seconds. Then it's going to be 40 seconds. And every time, less time you have, more points you can get. This is one group. They don't have to take any decisions. Besides how they're going to proceed in the task, but task is a closed task. You don't have to take many decisions at all. The other group, they will have, in just seconds before the task, they will have to choose what time they're aiming at.
Okay.
They can be conservative and go for a minute or 55 seconds. They're going to win only 1 or 2 points, but they should make it. Or they can take risk and go for 40 seconds. That's a very low chance of making that, but you get 10 points. This is what we're aiming at now, to see how this decision making is reflected in their goal-directed and spontaneous self-talk during different trials of the same task.
And you're going to need a big sample for that.
We're looking at a sample of about 6 groups of 4 participants for each condition.
Oh Christ, 4! Wow.
It's a good thing, because if you have 4 competing one with the other, you can sit on the same table.
Yeah.
And one of the important things, we did that with some pilot studies on the card sorting task. The most important thing, so that the experience is similar to sport, is that you have to look the opponent in the eye.
Oh right, of course, yeah.
That was this one against one. This I challenge you. That's something that's typical from sports.
It is. Many sports do that.
Computer games might have that as well, but I think there's no many other areas in life where you really sit in front of somebody and going to say, "I try to beat you."
Yes, not in such a not where the brutality of winning and losing is so normalised.
Might be going out in the disco, in the pub at night. Might have this kind of situation. But I can't think of anything else. So in jobs, we do compete, but not face to face.
Yeah, no, we do it so nicely in jobs, don't we?
Yes, we're very polite.
It is. So, where can people get hold of you if they want to find out more stuff?
Well, basically, that's why we publish. Unfortunately, I'm not very into social media. I will try to do that. I think I'm learning on getting
social
on Twitter.
Media is missing out on responses. I mean, it's missing out.
So I have this impression of we use Facebook, we use Twitter, we use our blogs. We put up enormous amount of information.
Yeah.
But I'm very sure that if people see something on Facebook, they also read the article. But now I'm probably wrong, because one of the greatest shortcomings I have, and I'm completely honest on that, is that nobody cares of what we have done yet.
I mean, only that when you get a good researcher commenting on and then puts the article in there, just gives you an insight into what's going in there. And I think you can get some really. Twitter's quite short, of course, with its responses. It does open up to some recent meta-analysis on X, recent study on this does this, and when it's not the author promoting their own work, I actually think that's quite powerful. Whether it's worth having a look at. And then whether you have a chance to reading it, you can certainly signpost it. So, I mean, I see it's quite useful for that.
I will do for sure.
It's very easy to do as well. Like someone as labour saving as me allows. Usually Sam McCora has put a comment on Twitter, so if he listens to this, because he comments quite a lot on Twitter, and all good as well.
That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
No, I will do for sure. The other thing is, if you have quite easy surname, I would just say, okay, go on Google
I know.
and look up for me. I have a good thing that my surname is there's only one
Yes.
family and me. So you put my surname on Google Scholar, and you're going to find all my articles. The problem is my surname being only one in the world. I mean, it's quite difficult, so people don't come up with it.
And you put my name into Google, and you find a street map.
Okay, that's
Right, that's a wrap. Any final points?
well. Most of all, one of the important things in research is getting into contact with others, doing your own ideas, talking with people who do research with you.
Yeah,
It's that's academic self enjoyment. There's nothing rich in that. So if
so
somebody
what you say is
listens
us academics need to invite other academics into
Yes.
our ivory towers.
especially these academics that you might not want to invite because they're going to be critical of you.
Yeah,
I think in academics, I mean, we're not speaking about who's right and who's wrong.
no.
It's about the reasons you have to believe that you're right, or reasons the other believe.
I
that
do
you're
think
wrong.
the best academics, the ones who can say that we didn't get that right. And you look at stuff by, Lazarus changed his mind, and it's lovely to see that shift in direction. And that's quite nice when academics will just say, actually, the data says otherwise. And if the data, you can stand behind your theory, but if data keep telling you the other way, you're best off to stick with the data, aren't you?
Yes.
Or start attacking how the data's collected, which is not in a negative way. But if all the data is collected with such a bad measure, then you can go, well, it might be saying that, but it's not saying that
You can
because
do it once or twice. You can say the data was wrong.
yeah,
I mean, consistently you have to be flexible. There's the final comment is if somebody has something positive, negative comment, whatever.
yeah,
I'm open.
I agree with that as well. Right, that's us done. Thank you very much.